Mr. Acting Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. The first is for approval of the minutes of our September 3rd committee meeting. Could I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Next item is update by Chairman Palmer on central dispatching, and I will turn it over to City Manager Kiley to do the heavy lifting on this.
Thank you, Alderman Palmer. As the City Council knows, earlier this year we passed a resolution to establish a multi-jurisdictional task force to look at shared fire services. Those communities involved include Highland Park, Highwood, Lake Forest, and Lake Bluff. Alderman Palmer and I are the city's representative to that task force, and the task force has met on a couple of occasions and discussed items related to that. And as you'll hear very shortly, the whole discussion on dispatch really is an outgrowth of the fire service study that was started a couple of years ago. And this evening, what we're looking for is from some general feedback and direction from the council, because the next task force meeting is at the end of this month. And at that time, there will be reports from the four respective communities on the report that we're going to go over here this evening with the City Council, and what general direction or concerns or issues each of the respective governing boards might have, so that we can come back and make a more formal report in November. This evening I'm going to quickly just go through the background, talk about the options, alternatives, and then the next steps going forward. As I said, this journey really began back in 2010 when we started the discussion on the Shared Fire Service report. But after phase one of the report, and pretty close to the completion of the report in 2012, the consultants made it abundantly clear that even if the city collectively did not want to proceed with any joint fire service operation, that there definitely were benefits that could be achieved through centralized dispatching, that there were some redundancies and some efficiencies that could be realized if the communities came together in more of a consolidated or centralized dispatching operation. So with that information at hand, we proceeded with the phase one of the dispatching study in October of 2012. As I said, in January of 13, the four communities, you might remember, came together in Highland Park, heard the presentation on the fire service report, established a task force. But so we've been running, if you will, down parallel tracks. And I think it's safe to say, and Alderman Palmer may not want to weigh in as well, is that the committee said we're not going to jump from where we are today to a completely consolidated fire district. That we really want to do is look at, is there some low-hanging fruit, some other early successes that we can realize, and dispatching is clearly one of those. In June of this year, the phase two dispatching study was presented to the task force at their meeting, and the task force did give some consideration to what they felt were the two most viable options out of 5 that were being considered at their September meeting. Those 5 options included: 1, status quo, doing nothing, leaving the current situation that's in place, and just to sort of summarize, Lake Forest right now, we dispatch for both our fire and police. We also dispatch for Knollwood Fire, for Lake Bluff Fire, and for Highwood Police. Highwood Fire is with Red Center, and Lake Bluff also does its own police dispatching, with the city picking up some minimal portions of that. And Highland Park is dispatching both its own police and fire. So if we didn't do anything, we would continue to maintain that situation. The next option that was looked at was virtual consolidation, and really what this is using new technology, is leaving all the dispatching operations in place, but they could be interconnected and they could work together, and if one goes down, you could quickly shift to another community. One of the things that I think discounted this early is what the technology is still emerging, and so we would really be on the cutting edge, number one. Number two is you'll see the potential dollar savings weren't as significant as some of these other options that we were looking at. The third option would be for the 4 communities to consolidate their dispatching operations down at the Highland Park Public Safety Building. Some of you may know it's located down there near, I think it's a Jewel and Toys R Us and some other stores down in that area. When they constructed that building a few years ago, they built in sufficient space so that there wouldn't be any capital expense associated with building new area to consolidate the larger number of dispatchers that would be located at any one period of time there. The fourth option would be to contract out directly with the Village of Glenview. This is something that when we first started the conversation, we didn't have on our radar, but very recently, I think within the last 6 months, Glenview has contracted with Morton Grove, Niles, and had previously contracted with Grays Lake to do their dispatching for them. So we asked the consultant to take a look at that option and get a price from Glenview, and it is under consideration. The real differences between option 3, consolidate in Highland Park, and option 4, contract with Glenview, is really in a governance issue. Because in the contracting with Glenview, we would be contracting through an intergovernmental agreement for them to provide service to us. We wouldn't have any say in how that service necessarily was provided. It's just more or less a direct contract. We're buying that service from them. The discussion with respect to consolidating in Highland Park is that there be a governance board, which the 4 communities would have representatives on the governing board and making determinations as how we would staff and how we would operate the dispatch center. And the fifth and final, Glenview offered an alternative, which was basically still hosting the dispatching operation in Highland Park, but instead of them being Highland Park employees or employees of the 4 jurisdictions, that they'd actually be Glenview employees that they would dispatch out to that location and then have the interaction between their staffs in Glenview and their staffs in Highland Park. But basically, we would be contracting for them to put their bodies out in Highland Park. As I said, a few of the issues that have come up throughout the discussion on the Consolidated Dispatch Study was, number one, is governance and control. Because clearly we have maximum control right now within our borders. We can make decisions on staffing, we can make decisions on equipment, and so forth. As you move away in a more centralized arrangement, you obviously have to give up some control with respect to many of those decisions. So part of the 2 options we have here is with respect to Glenview and with respect to consolidating in Highland Park is to what extent do we want to maintain control? And I know the 2 chiefs have spent an awful lot of time over the last week or 2 talking with the chiefs of some of these other communities that have recently gone into these, or there are situations, Arlington Heights, Buffalo Grove, some of those communities have been in consolidated dispatching operations for 15 plus years. The other issue that the city of Lake Forest would have to really consider in this whole arrangement would be the 24/7 presence in the public safety building lobby. We currently have a body sitting in that front lobby 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks of the year. So if anybody stopped in there at any time of the day, there would be a live body that would be there that the person could talk to. Under these 2 scenarios, while we could rearrange schedules and we could elongate the time that somebody was in that front office area, the bottom line would be there would be a period of time that there would not be a person there. Or if we wanted to do that, if that was a conscious decision, we said, well, we like the idea of centralized dispatching, but we want to have somebody there, then the numbers that you will see will have to be reduced to take into account the additional personnel that would have to be hired to staff that space during that period of time. Related to that, too, though, is the fact that because of the magnitude of work in our communities and the fact that we are mandated by law to have 2 people on at all times, that these individuals have been given other ancillary services to do in between their dispatching duties that are on there. So the question that we would have to look at, that the 2 chiefs and the HR director would have to really sit down and sort through, is what work is not going to be accomplished by these bodies if we were to move to either Glenview or Highland Park, and what kind of staffing would we have to backfill to be able to do some of the administrative functions that are currently underway by the dispatchers. One of the other functions that's there too is the whole prisoner management issue, which would have to be taken into consideration because there are state laws in terms of making sure that you're checking on the prisoners on a periodic basis. You can handle some of that through cameras, but then there is also the issue of how do you have to, you might have to dispatch a police officer to actually come in, which even though we have a dispatcher in the building right now, if somebody is a prisoner and is getting out of hand, the dispatcher does not go back into the jail cell. They still will dispatch out for a police officer, but there's those nuances that are still going to have to be worked out with respect to prisoner management. And then clearly, as there's just the fiscal considerations, this was one of the objectives in our strategic plan through fiscal stewardship, is constantly looking for these kinds of multi-jurisdictional arrangements to try and continue to provide a high level of service to our residents, but to try and bring down the cost of city operations. This chart I know is a little hard to read, but I think it's in your packet. You have all seen this. This is, and I draw your attention to the very bottom. I don't know if I can. Whoops, that wasn't what I wanted to do. There we go. Which is the laser here? Is it the center? Yeah. If you turn to the bottom line here, which is really the potential 5-year savings that the 3 communities would realize under these different scenarios. Scenario 1 with the status quo, clearly there wouldn't be any realized savings. We would just continue to operate as we have in the past. Scenario 2, which was the virtual consolidation, you could see there was actually a cost by having to purchase some of the technology to be able to do that. So that was part of the reason why that option was discounted at a very early stage. Option 3, which is consolidating at Highland Park for Lake Forest, we're looking at approximately 2.4, 2.5. With option 4A with the contracting out directly to Lake Bluff, the potential savings is a little higher at 2.5. And then if Glenview was to host their personnel in Highland Park, that savings drops a little for the city of Lake Forest. I want to stress, though, that these are numbers that have been put together by the consultant. I know the 2 chiefs are further vetting some of these costs, and I think a lot of the decision, again, in terms of staffing and what we would have to do can affect these numbers plus or minus, because there's also some other related administrative costs that could go up or down, again, depending on what the final arrangement looks like. But I think it gives you a magnitude of the potential savings that's out there for this 5-year period of time. So to our operating budget, it's roughly $400,000 or $500,000 a year that would be freed up for other operating purposes. I know that going back to the question of 24/7, there's new technologies that are certainly in place right now, and I think any of you that have been to the public safety building know that when you walk in there, you have the foyer area, and then you can walk into the lobby area. So what some communities have done that have gone to this centralized dispatching is to have these camera screen setups there, and so the person is immediately, if they walk in, looking at a dispatcher, and in this case it would be a dispatcher in Highland Park or Glenview, but in theory you could be in India or anywhere else from that matter, in terms of being able to allow access to a person to be able to come into the lobby and then wait there while they dispatch a police officer to come in and address any of the issues they have. So the technology has significantly improved over the years, much that a resident who may have to visit the public safety building early in the morning when we didn't have somebody there, certainly I think we could address the security issue that they might have about being out by themselves at that early morning hour. The next steps really is a couple of things that we're working on. The chiefs have had one meeting with representatives of the Village of Glenview. They've got another meeting set up this Friday to do further vetting of the options, to really understand what's included in that price, what's not included in that price. And The task force is coming back together on October 28th, and that's really the time that Alderman Palmer and I would like to convey to the task force whatever issues, concerns, ideas, thoughts that you might have as we further deliberate on what is the best option for the communities going forward. I would anticipate that the task force, following their October meeting or shortly thereafter, would then make a recommendation back to the 3 respective governing boards. So you might see that in November or your first meeting in December. And then again, depending on which option we select, I would expect that implementation would take anywhere from 3 to 6 months, potentially down the road. So with that, I will turn it over to Alderman Palmer and then to the City Council.
Right, does anyone have any thoughts? I think we'd like to get a sense of where the council is coming from on this before we have our meeting on it. Anyone's free to
Sure.
talk.
Throw some ideas out there. First, with the plan, kind of the hybrid, where we have the Glenview plan, but it's monitored in Highland Park. I kind of get it, but I don't get it. Could we do a Glenview plan where we're manned in Lake Forest? What bounds us to go through Highland Park for the modified plan?
The good question is you don't have to, and yes, it could be if the communities decided it was better to be in Lake Forest than in Highland Park. I think the reason that the Highland Park was identified was simply from a square footage basis. They have more space available to them than we do. You know, we're fairly restricted in Lake Forest. There are 2 slots. You could probably put a 3rd person in there, but it gets a little tight.
So if we're going with the Glenview Highland Park plan, it's for consolidation with Highland Park, Lake Bluff, and Highwood. 4 communities, really, that we're joining with in that plan.
Yeah, thank you, Alderman. I should have mentioned that we have a contract with Highwood, and basically wherever Lake Forest goes, Highwood would go, or Highwood would have to find an alternative service that would dispatch for them. We've put Highwood and Lake Bluff Fire on notice almost a year ago that we were in this study because we are required contractually to give them 1 year notice. But Lake Bluff is part of the study, so they know what we're doing. But we've tried to keep Highwood involved. But yes, it would be effectively the 4 communities would be dispatched depending on which option we went with.
And then completely other, one thought I have is, generally, okay, if we're going to have a service that's gonna be on par with Glenview, Morton Grove, and all these communities, in a perverse way, I like to somehow envision that there's a way that we can make the service in Lake Forest better instead of just equal to surrounding communities. One thought I had, and it's a very nuts and bolts issue, is if we're talking about having a monitor or a place to come in the public safety building, could it be possible if we're doing it where you walk into a telephone booth type thing or somewhere where you're talking to a monitor, could we have stations in other areas of the city? Because if you're coming in from the west side, it's a long way to go down to Deer Path. Could we have something maybe at the fire station on the west side that would be a station that would be comparable? So it would be easier for people who are having emergencies to get to a dispatch station.
Right. It's an interesting concept. To be honest with you, I don't think we've looked into it. Certainly the chiefs could look into it. The key would be to make sure that we could allow them access to a secured area.
Thinking the fire station would be the likely one versus train station, but if there's a freight train coming through, I mean, there's a number of reasons why you can't get to the east side from the west side. And trying to be a little sensitive to their needs also, we have an opportunity maybe to expand the service that we have.
Right.
Just a thought.
No, it's a good thought.
That's a great thought from the 1st Ward, which is right there. So those of us in the 4th Ward and the 3rd Ward appreciate your thinking.
We're trying to share.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I have a couple of, one observation and one question. One thing that I think we need to be cognizant of here is if you go this way, it's really hard to go back. I mean, this is not something where you get to take a pass and say, oops, this didn't work, we need to go back to the old way. The cost of doing that, I'm sure, would be prohibitive. So it's kind of, it has to be considered very carefully, moved along one step at a time. But one question I had was, where do the bulk of the savings come from? Is it in software? Is it in equipment? Is it in, I mean, obviously, most of these things come down to people predominantly, but I'm just curious where the balance is. I kind of went through the report trying to figure that out, and it wasn't terribly clear, so.
The answer is all the above, I guess, is the best way. Let's start with personnel, because currently between those three communities, we have currently about 21 employees that are designated for just the dispatching operations. Under the proposed consolidation in Highland Park, it drops to about 16, 15. And what Glenview is actually proposing would even drop it further down to about 12, again, just through the certain economies of scale that are there. So a significant portion is the personnel costs. You might recall, or actually you haven't seen this yet, you will see very shortly capital costs associated with upgrading our dispatching operation. So you have the hardware costs associated with that, but then also one of the conversations, and I would say one of the reasons that Glenview is such an attractive option, I think, for us right now, is with our CAD system, our software dispatching. We've had some problems over the last couple of years with it, and Representatives of Glenview have helped us out tremendously to get it stabilized, if you will. But I think there are potential, very significant potential savings by sharing software rather than each of us having our own individual software packages as well. Because I think we're spending $800,000–900,000 a year on our CAD software program. And that isn't even factored into these savings here if that potential can be occurred. So really it's a capital, software, and personnel cost, all the above.
Any other comments, questions? Mr. Engelmann.
Should we have any concern that the monitor will be staffed by a person remote who may not have the personal intimacy or familiarity with town, the streets, the schools, and so forth? Or will that be pretty seamless because of the technology they have in the software?
No, I think it's a very legitimate issue, and I know that the chiefs have that same concern, because whether they're in Highland Park, Glenview, or wherever they might be, do they really know our community? So if somebody calls and they say, I need somebody dispatched at, let's just say they say Green Bay and Western. Well, Green Bay and Western don't intersect, and so they need to have some familiarity. Part of that is through training and making sure that these individuals are out and know the communities. I think one of the things that certainly Glenview talked about was that they would have as a requirement in their training that they come and they visit your community, and they're driving around, and while they may not know every street in the community, they at least know the large major intersections and so forth. So I think that's a very legitimate issue, and it's I think an ongoing concern that would be there, that we make sure that if somebody picks up the phone and makes that call, they have no idea that that person's not sitting down on Deer Path.
Are there any communities that have done this and then after a 3 or 4 year period decided to undo it and go back to doing their own dispatch?
I'm not aware of any, but I might ask the two chiefs to come forward, because I know you've talked to a number of chiefs recently, so you must have got the short straw.
I just got up too quick, I guess. Alderman, answer your question. I know that there was a department that was with Northwest Central Dispatch, and I do believe they left there, but they went to another consolidated dispatch. So it's not like they went back to do it back on their own. They just changed central areas. I can't remember which department that was off the top of my head, but very rarely does it happen where a community will join into a central dispatching situation and be able to go back to do it on their own, so to speak. They usually will just maybe change dispatching centers. There's plenty of them around up in the Round Lake area. They had CENTCOM. There are a bunch of different areas up there. There's all sorts of little ones around the area. So I think just people just kind of, if they're not happy, they might hop around from place to place more than anything else. But very rarely they go back to on their own.
Chief, while you're there, what have you learned about some of the communities that have recently gone either to Glenview, or I think Libertyville just went to Vernon Hills? What did they do with the 24/7 coverage, and how did they handle it?
everybody does a little something different. Grays Lake has been with Glenview for several years now. They have nobody in their station at all. I mean, they leave it alone, but they kind of have a little bit different arrangement with Glenview, with the contract they have with them. Will allow for Glenview to do more than what Morton Grover Niles has entered into with them also. Some of the communities out in again, Northwest Central Dispatch, they'll have somebody there 24 hours a day, whether it's a records person, a CSO. So it's a little bit of everything. There isn't one consistent model. Libertyville, I haven't been able to touch base with the chief yet, but I know they just went to Vernon Hills. So obviously they have somebody there during the day. As far as the evening hours, not so much. I've called there. I live in Libertyville, so I've called there myself, and I get the Vernon Hills dispatcher, so there's obviously nobody in the Libertyville station during the evening hours. Again, I think it's more of a hodgepodge. There isn't that one consistent, everybody's staffing 24/7.
Palmer, I had a question. Is there a way to break out, and I think, Bob, you brought it up, and George asked a good question, where the savings are really coming from? So if the savings are coming from personnel, and they're coming from software, and they're coming from training, or whatever it may be, is there any kind of a middle-of-the-road scenario where perhaps you still had someone in the building? You had an officer, you had a CSO, you had someone there. So if the concern that, the concern I've heard from residents and others that we've talked about is there's nobody there when I walk in. Is there a middle ground, or could we at least see what the numbers look like if we outsourced it, but we still kept someone there? What kind of savings it might be? It certainly won't be as dramatic, but it might, to George's point, it might allow us to take the first step. And if that first step we decide doesn't work, then it may be a little easier to pull back, and it may give us a little more of a comfort level that there's still someone in the station if someone walks in.
Sure. No, we can absolutely do that.
But Don, following up on your point, isn't it more likely that a person walking into the station is going to be coming in on a non-emergency basis, and that emergency issues will probably be telephoned in 911? So wouldn't that kind of diminish the need to have a person there for a walk-in, since it's a non-emergency deal?
I would think, Mike, during the day they would. During the night, I don't think they would be. I would think although someone's told me about people coming in to pay parking tickets at 2 o'clock in the morning, but I would think logically if someone's coming in from, call it 10 o'clock at night until 6 o'clock in the morning, it is more of an emergency basis.
I think Mike's point is they have an alternative.
Right.
Of just picking up the phone, which is probably quicker and probably more effective.
Well, and that's the other piece about, do you really need something on the west side, or, when you've got 911?
You want to address how people have used the station in the early morning hours?
I'll try. Every now and then, and I couldn't give you a number because we don't keep those stats, somebody will come in with an emergency after hours. And that could be 10 o'clock at night, it could be 2 in the morning. It does happen. Not with great frequency, but from time to time it does happen. It could be something where somebody's driving home at night and they think somebody's following them, so we pretty much train people, or that's what we tell, pull into the police station and come into the police station. It's a safe haven, basically. So does it happen a lot? No. Does it happen? Yes. I couldn't give you a frequency rate. It might happen 6 or 7 times a year. It could be less, it could be more, kind of depends. There's situations with custody of children where people have to come to the station, do exchanges. I mean, I wish I would have made a list of all the different types of reasons. Emergency, semi-emergency, non-emergency. The majority of the foot traffic into the building is non-emergency related. It's to make a report, to pay a parking ticket, to get a permit or something along those lines. But the vast majority of it is very non-emergency related, yes.
Okay.
Isn't the person that you speak to in the station at that time pretty much hermetically sealed behind glass anyway? Yeah, I mean, you're kind of talking to somebody who's not personally accessible to you, and if you had a problem, wouldn't they bring somebody into the station to deal with the problem and stay where they were? Or?
Yes, yeah, that's exactly right. Our dispatchers are in a enclosed room that's not accessible to the public. The big advantage, obviously, being able to come into the station is you're actually coming inside a building as opposed to perhaps coming into the lobby and having to pick up a phone to get somebody. So it is a safer environment once you're inside the building. Not 100% safe if somebody's following you to do you harm and they really want to do it, they could follow you in, obviously. But yeah, there's not like the person's going to come out from the communications. They're definitely going to call somebody in to address your issue.
how much activity is there from people, just non-emergency, but, I mean, do people really, let me back up. I know people use the lobby for simple transactions. I've been in there a few times. But my experience has been it's things that there could easily be done elsewhere. Things like picking up no parking signs and that kind of thing, getting permits for parks, and I don't even know if that's done there anymore. But it'd be interesting to know how much traffic there really is.
During the daytime, there's a fair amount of traffic, and a lot of it has to do with paying parking tickets or various record-keeping type of things. From a actual police standpoint, we do get people that come in and they want to make a report out. For whatever reason, they didn't call, they decided to drive in on their way to or from work or wherever they're going, or maybe they were someplace else and something happened to them there. So I don't have a number for you. It's not something that we've ever really tracked accurately. For a while there, when the study started, we were trying to do a foot traffic count, and it was kind of hard to do it, who was in for what reason, because they didn't always go to the dispatcher, they would go to the records window, so sometimes you just don't know what they were coming in for. But 95% of the traffic that comes into lobby is not for making a police report out, it's for something else, paying a parking ticket or getting information or something along those lines.
Kind of like a 24-hour convenience store.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
I mean, I think there's a lot of good questions, but I see no reason not to proceed with this study, given the significant savings.
Is that everyone's thought? Can we also get this out to the public for comment? Okay, I mean, I think we'll get a lot of ideas based on the feedback we get from the public.
Yeah, and that's part of why we're here this evening, to make sure it's out there. And I don't know if the press is, well, they are hiding in the back there. We'll make sure that we work with them and get it out there to get as many comments, public input as we possibly can.
Okay. Do we want to narrow down any of the options to not look at it, or want to look at all the options?
I would suggest we only look at the two that I think we're seriously considering at this meeting, which is consolidate with Highland Park and contract with Glenview.
How's everyone else feel about that? Okay. All right, so let's proceed that way.
All right.
Okay. Having said that, next item is other matters. Are there any other matters?
I do have one. And I'll ask Susan Banks to please come forward, because she wants to share with you a modification to our website, or an improvement, I should say, to our website.
Thank you, Bob. As you know, the website has been up and running for a couple of months now, and we're receiving very good feedback from residents and realtors and businesses, and continuing to make improvements and additions every day. One of the things that has come to our attention is that we really needed a spot on the website for people to make suggestions, or if residents didn't know who to contact, there was no real clarified place on our website where they could go if they didn't know the name of somebody or know the right department. So we have 3 places now on our homepage where a person can find somebody that they don't know or to make a suggestion. And the first place is at the top. If you click on Contact Staff, the first item will stay here all the time as a static item. It's called Don't Know Who to Contact. And if you click on that, here's a phone number to call, which is the city's general number. If you click on Contact, it will bring up this window, Don't Know Who to Contact, and then the person would fill in the information and click Submit. And that would send an email to me, and then I would direct it to the appropriate staff. The second place on the homepage is under I Want To, which is probably one of the most functional things on the entire website. I want to contact someone to make suggestion. So that brings up the same window, and you do the same thing. Don't know who to contact. And the third place is on the bottom of the homepage, where the general phone number is also listed. under Contact Us, and that brings up the same window, don't know who to contact. So we're hoping that that will solve that issue, and we look forward to getting input from you and residents all the time. Are there any questions, or?
We'll be able to find you on the website to give you our comments, right?
You can. My name starts with the letter B, so I'm on that first page there, so.
All right.
Susan, I just have a question. Would it make sense under that don't know who to contact, in addition to having the phone number, just to have the email as well? So when you, not that page, but the first page that you showed where it says don't know who to contact, and then it has a
Contact
general
staff.
number for the city?
That is the general number for the city right there.
And then there's an email.
There's an
button.
email.
The email.
And an
All
email.
right.
Yeah. Okay,
Okay, any other comments? Thank you, Susan.
thank you.
Next is an opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone here from the public who'd like to make a comment? If not, is there anything we can take from the council agenda and maybe get a head start on it? I mean, it looks like we have a huge omnibus.
You do. I think there was a question that came up, and Vic is trying to look up the liquor ordinance right now. There were some questions with respect to the waiving provisions that are being included in one of the items there. As I mentioned earlier, we had, and Alderman Waldeck knows this because she's gotten a lot of phone calls on this. We were, when we did the comprehensive amendments to the liquor ordinance, one of the things that is in the state law that's a requirement is for individuals, principals who are going to be holding the license to be fingerprinted. Well, in practice, we were learning that a lot of our local groups, who will remain nameless just because I don't want to call them out in a public meeting, but some of the local groups said, why do I need to be fingerprinted? You know who I am, and so on and so forth. And so the purpose of this was to identify those categories, which was generally the service organizations, the not-for-profit groups, to not have to get fingerprinted. They could request that the liquor commissioner waive that requirement, and this would give the authority to the liquor commissioner to do that. I think there were some questions, though, specifically about what was being waived or what the liquor commissioner had the authority to waive, and I will punt to the city attorney to try and address that.
I will speak slowly, as there's one provision that I'm drawing a blank as to specifically what it refers to, and I understand our deputy clerk will be filling that in for me momentarily. If you look at page 68 of your packet, that is the first of the waivers. It allows the mayor, as local liquor commissioner, as Bob was just saying, to waive the fingerprinting requirement with respect to our not-for-profit applicants for licenses. On page 69, you'll see under Q, that relates to the Social Security requirements. What that means is that we will require not only the licensee, but also the individual officers and directors to go through a full review for their background checks. We would allow a waiver, again, the mayor would have that as a discretionary matter, allow a waiver for those special permits that are for not-for-profits, not to have the full review of the officers and directors. It would just be a clearance for the organization itself. If you look at R, regarding section 4-16, 8A, and this is the one that, this is having to do with some of the basic training for those who are dispensing alcohol. We do require for all of our applicants for the regular licenses to show that they have persons who have what's called Bassett and TIPS training, which are techniques to identify patrons who may have been overserved, so that they are going to be properly monitored, and also to make sure that they know the requirements for checking IDs and the like. We're not going to or I should say, we're going to allow the mayor under certain circumstances to waive the requirement of specifically showing that. A typical example might be that the organization is hiring somebody else to do it, and the organization itself doesn't have the personnel. So the mayor can waive that as to the organization and look really to the contractor who's going to be purveying the alcohol.
But Vic, as it's written now, without that waiver, would it require, for a special event, a not-for-profit to submit fingerprints for every single person who was selling or dispensing liquor?
Our current regulations aren't for everybody who's selling or dispensing. It's for the licensee, their officers, directors, and in the event if it's a for-profit entity, anyone with an interest of 5% or more in that entity. So, for example, if the American Legion came in and they wanted to get a license, it would be not just the American Legion, but whomever is currently serving as their officers and directors. And that would be even for a one-day permit. And I think that's, and I don't mean to pick on them, I just pick them as a matter of alphabetical order. The notion is that we have primarily local entities that are serving in that role. They are well known to the city, and it's both a concern and inconvenience to the applicants, as well as an additional burden on the staff to have to go through that to the same degree that we would for someone who's a permanent licensee. That's not to say that they wouldn't. It would just say that the mayor has the discretion to relieve them of that particular obligation for a particular special event license.
Okay, that was kind of my next question, is would this be under the mayor's discretion on a pretty much a case-by-case basis?
Yes, that's how we have it drafted.
So it's not necessarily an across-the-board waiver for all not-for-profits special events?
It would not be an across-the-board. It would be an individual waiver determination by the mayor.
All right, and then are we then opening ourselves up to the possibility that those who we don't waive it for
if you're
complain?
concerned about an equal protection issue, I think the response is two levels. A, this is not a right that the equal protection doctrine would necessarily extend to. Licenses of this nature are considered a privilege, not a right, and therefore equal protection considerations are not there. Even if they did exist, it would be a very low threshold. And if the mayor made a determination that someone is familiar with the city, someone who has close ties to the city, someone, if they do something wrong, we know where they live, type of thing, it's a very different thing than someone who is from outside the city and is not as familiar. So I think that there is also the rational basis to make that distinction, even if there were a true due process, or I'm sorry, equal protection issue at stake.
I have a question. Once we get the fingerprints, what do we do with them?
Under both our ordinance and state law, we run them through the state, I'm trying to remember, Chief might be able to help me with the initials, but there is a database that we run them through to make sure that they don't have criminal history that would make them disqualified under our ordinance.
Okay.
And then Alderman Palmer, I actually get that report, so I'm aware of that.
Okay, good.
And then the last exemption, or the last change, I should say, is the one you'll see on page 70, and that's just modifying the insurance requirements, again, for some of the special event licenses.
Is that saying that the insurance requirements could be waived as well?
No, that's not a waiver, that's a reduction in the max, or the minimum requirements for the insurance for them.
Okay.
If you have any other questions, I'll be happy to try to address them. And sorry for the fumble as I waited to get the copy of the code.
Is there anything else from the council agenda we can get a head start on? I mean, I know stuff on the golf course. Do we want to wait on that?
Well, we have a formal presentation on the Kemper report itself, so, and I don't see them here, so we might have to wait on that. And I know I could talk about the electric charging station. I know there was going to be an individual from Green Wheels here, but if Susan will put the map up, I could probably very quickly show you what is being contemplated. and this is a topic that we've been looking at probably for about a year now through the North Shore Electric Aggregation Consortium. Just to familiarize yourself, the North Shore Electric Aggregation Consortium is a group of 8 municipalities that came together to aggregate electricity, and which has saved millions of dollars for Lake Forest residents just over the last couple of years. But as a part of that, the group's work, we've said, let's look at other things that we can do to try and become more energy efficient. And one of those, and we was discussed during the city's strategic plan too, was looking at ways to encourage greater energy efficiency with respect to vehicles in town. The communities went out for bid for electric vehicle charging stations. And I think you have the memo in your packet, I think there was originally 6 companies that submitted bids. They interviewed 4 of them. The company that they're recommending is Green Wheels. And we've had representatives of Green Wheels out looking at various locations around town as to where might be the best location for this, both from a usability standpoint, but also least expensive for installation of the equipment and so forth. And they've identified a location directly behind City Hall here. They're the far north part of the City Hall lot, and there are currently 4 parking spaces that are there right now. But this gives you an idea of what an electrical charging or vehicle charging station looks like. Don't ask me about how it works, because I've never used one myself personally. But basically what happens is that you can come in and you leave your car, you charge it up depending on the type of car. It could be anywhere from, I think, 4 to 8 hours to do a full charge. You swipe your credit card, or you have a credit card with the company here. And I think in your packet was and maybe Susan, we have a picture that shows where the number of stations are there, because there are a number of stations in Lake County, northern Cook County right now. Probably the closest one to us would be out at the Tollway Oasis that people can go and charge up at. But this would be for either people who might be shopping in downtown Lake Forest, who might be working in downtown Lake Forest, that they could pull into one of these sites and to get their car charged up. I have to say that when we first started talking about this, I didn't know what the demand was, but we learned recently from the Village of Deerfield, who also has this on their agenda tonight, there's actually 1,400 electric vehicles within a 24-mile radius of Deerfield zip code registered under the state of Illinois, which was much higher than I thought it was. But I also recently talked to the manager of Skokie, and they have I'm going to pronounce this wrong, is it Tesla? Tesla, thank you. You must be Doug. That apparently they are flying off the shelf, so to speak, and very popular despite a rather high price tag. And so I think everybody anticipates that the number certainly will grow in this area. The good news about the consortium participating in on this is that we sought out grants, and about half the cost of this will be absorbed by a grant that will be used through the consortium. So the outlay of costs is relatively nominal, but it was more of a policy question I wanted to get from the council as to whether or not we were going to offer this free of charge to users or have a nominal $1 charge. And as you can see, I think from the survey that was included in your packet, it varies. If you go to Walgreens right now, I think many Walgreens have these facilities, but you pay $2. Deerfield is looking at $1. That's what staff would be recommending to you this evening as well. But there's also a number of other communities or facilities that are out there that actually do it free of charge. Now, in terms of the dollar, the way that it would work is that the company who manages and operates the equipment, they take roughly 10 cents off of the price. Then you're paying, I think it's 37 cents to ComEd for the utility charge, and the net, my math works out, is that the city basically gets 40 cents out of the dollar in terms of a revenue stream. We're not looking at making large amounts of money. The payback of this equipment at that cost would be a long period of time. I think it's 15 years, but I think it's an issue of whether or not we want to completely subsidize users of electric cars or not going forward. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't know, is Doug Snower up? Doug is here. Doug, maybe you can come forward and you might be able to correct anything that I have either misstated or... go to the microphone so people at home can hear you. You've got thousands of people at home watching you, so...
That makes me very, very comfortable to know. I'm Doug Snower. I represent Green Wheels, and we're the facilitator of this project. And we've done many of these types of projects across Chicagoland, and looking forward to working on this project. I grew up in the North Shore, and it's nice to bring this type of project home. Bob Spatz is with the manufacturer and represents ChargePoint, who manufactures the product, and also knows a lot more about how the networking structure works in the fee-based or the free-based charging program works. So happy to answer any questions. Maybe that's the best way to.
How long does it take to charge a car? I mean, I have this concept now, someone pulling up to one of these, plugging in his car and walking away for several hours, which means we may charge 1 or 2 cars a day. And I don't know how big a convenience that is to anyone.
Right. Well, realistically, most people charge at home at night, and unless they're traveling a long distance, and it varies by car, the size of the battery is dependent on how much time it takes to charge the car. So generally speaking, these cars could take 4 to 6 hours to charge if they're completely empty. So, you know, if you get a traveler coming from out of town who's traveled 40 or 50 miles to visit Lake Forest, which is not a bad thing, they would spend 4 to 5 hours refilling their car if they want to fill it all the way back up to full. And hopefully during that time period, you know, they're doing a little shopping or something in the downtown
Or else
area.
they park their car into our free outlet and they have someone take them home, so they don't have to pay for the electricity.
Right,
for
or
it.
they can do some of that, but there is some mechanisms in place, and Bob could probably address that a little bit better on how to prevent people from charging their car for over lengthy periods of time by escalating the fee structure after a certain time frame. Is that how that works?
A couple things about how long it takes to charge a vehicle.
Talking to the microphone so everybody else can hear.
Based on how long it takes to charge a vehicle, I guess the biggest question is how far do they drive? And the idea being the difference between an electric car and a gas vehicle car is if you're like me, when you drive your gas car, I wait till the little light comes on and I go fill it up. With an electric car, the idea is to go from the 24-hour Walgreens, where you're charging your vehicle, to coming to downtown Lake Forest to charge your vehicle, to go to Whole Foods to charge your vehicle, because they all have charge point stations. And then you go home and charge. So the idea of charging for 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours within this municipality is highly unlikely, because most of the people are driving short distances. The idea is also to bring additional people to your downtown area to go to your restaurants and do that. And people who support electric vehicle cars, believe me, they will follow electric vehicle charging stations. The other thing you can make a decision within pricing is you have a couple choices. One is, well, you have several choices. One is you can charge by the hour, you can charge by the kilowatt hour, you can charge for how long it's plugged into the vehicle, or you can charge for how long it's actually getting electricity. So usually at condos, if we put them in condos, they charge for how long it's plugged into the vehicle because they want the car to move from the charging location to their assigned parking spot. At a situation in a downtown restaurant area or a downtown shopping area, you're probably not going to get people that are going to be there all day. The other thing is it will come up on their smartphone and tell them you're fully charged. And most people, especially at the beginning here, people that drive electric cars are definitely supporting electric vehicles.
They'll see it, they'll probably get up and move their vehicle, especially so another vehicle can get in there and charge. So the idea of people being there 7, 8 hours, in this marketplace, in this area, it's not gonna happen, because they're just gonna be topping it off.
If you had an escalating fee, like the first hour is 10 cents, the second hour is $20, what would prevent somebody from unplugging their car at the end of 1 hour, waiting a minute, and then plugging it in again for another hour? I mean, it's gonna get gamed. We all know that.
Right, it could be a game, and so that's why my suggestion is, whatever, if you're going to charge people to use it, and most municipalities do not, most municipalities are using it as a draw to bring people to their downtown area. But if you're going to charge people, my suggestion would be then, with your concern is, charge a flat rate and charge it for as long as it's plugged into the vehicle. That way, when somebody knows their vehicle is fully charged in a half an hour, they're not gonna sit there for 8 hours because they're gonna be charged for 8 hours.
But if they unplug it and then replug it, it's like a whole new vehicle?
Yeah,
Potentially, but
right.
you could potentially make these 2-hour parking spots.
Okay.
Or 3-hour parking spots. I don't know if you have that distinction throughout the city for different time zones for parking. It would be, appropriate if you're concerned about people staying too long to make them 2-hour parking spots and then ticket.
Right. And with the, if you're going to charge people to use it, you can actually tell which drivers are using it based upon the car that they use to activate the unit. So you would be able to tell if someone is going to be there for an extreme, if somebody's doing exactly what you're talking. But if you keep a flat rate, they're not going to keep plugging it in, plugging it out. There's no advantage to it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Does it make sense to have one?
Well, first of all, these units are a dual charging unit,
Right.
so you're going to be charging 2 cars at one time. The one that you see there is a single. It's actually an outdated model. We just came out with the new one here in June. It's a dual charging unit. I'm assuming you're doing full charging on both plugs?
Yes, dual charging. And we're also, as we put this infrastructure in, because the site we selected, we're actually putting a new meter and a new circuit panel in. It will have the capability of expanding that should you decide to add some stations in the future.
I have an opinion on the pricing. It seems to me that you'll put 1 in, and then you put 2 in, and then pretty soon you'll be putting 10 in and 20 in as more people convert over to electric cars. So it seems to me that we should price, and that the pricing should be self-funding to allow the city to be able to continue to add charging stations as we move forward. I mean, 2 years from now, we could have 20, and then each one at 10,000 a pop. That's gonna get pretty expensive. So I think somehow, we've gotta have a way to finance that expansion should it occur, and I think it's gonna occur. And so that's why I think the pricing should somehow be worked out with a financial model that we can continue to grow the concept.
I'm sure that Green Wheels would love if we were looking at 20 or so down the road. Right now, the concept and the location actually is the way it backs up to the north side of City Hall lot. We could also add to Forest, the Forest Park lot, or what do we call that? Forest Drive lot just to the north if we wanted to. I think it's a good concept. I think we have no idea what the usage is going to be. So I think what we would do is, if the council so desires for us to charge it, we would bring it back annually as a part of our fees and charges to take a look at it. It seems like the maximum pricing, and Doug or Bob might have a different opinion, but what I've seen is the maximum was $2, which Walgreens, I think, charges. As was mentioned, a lot of municipalities are free. We thought we would start right about in the middle, though, and then see what type of activity we got, and we could go from there. I did mention, though, that without really knowing how much activity we would have over that period of time, that even the payback on roughly a $7,500 investment is still going to be a few years. And so I think that's what we would have to take a look at. Because the one thing we don't want to do is price ourselves out of the market and have nobody use our facility going forward. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts.
So as the administrator, Lake Forest will be the administrator of the software program, so you can adjust your fee structure at any time login to the software program. So you can monitor and adjust accordingly as you feel through the process of how the usage of the station. You can see how it's being used. You can change your fee structure accordingly.
Question.
The other thing to go along with that is, once you've put in the main unit, the first unit, the gateway unit, your biggest cost has been covered, and that's the installation cost. After that, as you add additional units, your installation cost is going to be a percentage of what the initial install is, as well as the second unit, the second charging station, costs less because it's a non-gateway unit. So your cost after you've installed the first station goes down considerably. The first one is the big one because of the cost of installation and running the power and everything to the original unit.
And it's also, the first unit is has the wireless infrastructure built into it that will communicate to the other stations. So the first station is the most expensive station, and the subsequent stations have less Wi-Fi capacity. They don't need to be the master unit. So they do get less expensive.
Question. What's the voltage and current of these, and how foolproof are they, safe-wise, from kids, teenagers, let's say, sticking a couple of electrical conductors in one of these and running a credit card? I know nothing about the technology, but is a plug-in itself pretty fail-safe?
It's a UL certified appliance, so it's passed all those safety requirements that UL would attach to it. It also has a locking plug component that you would actually need to swipe a card to remove the holster. So, we haven't experienced that type of safety issue.
Right.
But Bob will address that a little more.
The third thing with that is that the power does not go on until the plug, the J1772 plug, which is the standardized plug for all electric cars and all charging stations, talks to the car. And the car then says, yes, I need electricity. Then the power will be turned on through the charging station. If you just stick something in there, nothing's going to happen because it has to ask for the power.
Okay.
So they're safe. There's never been a problem with any of these stations.
So the industry is way ahead of me. They've thought about it.
Well, they've learned. The industry has changed so much that, and it's become now that there's a lot of things that are standardized. The plug is the #1 standardized thing that they came out with. Since then, some stations have different philosophies and different directions. ChargePoint Station is the global leader of charging stations because of their networking program, which puts them way ahead of everyone else.
Thank you.
Are these golf cart compatible?
No, they're not.
We'll retrofit the golf carts on the golf course next.
Okay. Any other questions? What do you need from the council on this? Was this just for information? Do you need action at the council?
Nope, really
meeting?
just a report, and I'm getting the sense, go ahead and charge, and then what we will do is include that charge annually on your fees and charges schedule, so as a part of your budget, you can annually come back, and I think to Alderman Reisenberg's question, we can take a look at how usage is, how it's being priced, and working with the contractor, see if we need to make adjustments on an annual basis.
Okay.
Everything in Lake Forest requires a permit. Have we been asked, first of all, do we have a permit requirement? Second of all, have we issued any permits?
Well, this would be
by others.
Yeah, we would internally have a permit for ourselves and have our electrical inspector inspect it after it's been installed.
I was really asking if we've had demand from other, like Walgreens or CVS or Sunset or anybody.
No, I think the closest one we have is out at the tollway. Now, that's not to say I don't know about residential use, so we don't have a number of these around town.
For instance, is there some way to get one on, in Settlers Square area?
There is certainly, we have been working with the office park out in Conway to see if they want to do it. And we've gone back and forth with them. I think if we take the first step, we might find some interest coming forward, because one of the questions was, do we want to have one central location? And then I think as they talked that through, they said, well, maybe each of us should have our own facility at our own location so our employees don't have to walk. So we're looking at that, but we could certainly take a look at a location out in Settler Square. We could look at one of the train stations. And maybe, Doug, when you were around talking with Karina and Matt, maybe, did you look at any on the west side?
Well, we certainly looked at a lot of locations. We were trying to find one that was the most cost-effective and most centrally located, closest to City Hall. Installation is a big factor on finding the right connection to the utility service. So there are a lot of opportunities for other locations, some of them similarly cost-wise, but others that may be more expensive due to the fact that we have to build this little infrastructure, and getting connection to the grid is the most costly part of the project up front. So there are a lot of potential locations. Each one has its unique infrastructure challenges.
Okay, but
We can take the lead on this, others will, as you said, others will
certainly.
read the headlines and follow.
And I think we should pair this with a parking time limit. Otherwise, we're likely to get somebody just plugging in and keeping it, so I'll leave that up to
Sure.
you guys. All right, anything else? If not.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned for, 3 minutes, 5 minutes? What do you want?
The council will begin at 7.